Today's first reading tells about an incident from the life of one of the Old Testament heroes, David, who as a teenager had slaved to life and so was much praised among the people, all of which provoked King Saul, who was envious of the young man and sought to kill him. Today's passage underlines the best of David, who, when he has a chance to kill his persecutor, resists the temptation to kill the one God anointed as king. It's a fine entree into the teaching that exhorts the Lord's followers, and that includes us, to love our enemies and be merciful to them as God is merciful to us. While these words are also found in Matthew as part of the Sermon on the Mount, today's passage comes from Luke, the gospel that the Italian poet Dante described as the gospel of God's compassion. The parables of the Good Samaritan and the prodigal son are only in Luke. So too the cure of the 10 lepers, the raising of the widow's son, the story of Zacchaeus the tax collector, as well as the promise of paradise to the good thief. All of these are only in Luke. In short, it is Luke who not only calls us to be merciful as God is merciful, but also underlines to whom such compassion, generosity, and love is to be shown, not just to those who love us. For as the Lord reminds his listeners, even sinners do that. Thus, what makes the gospel such a challenge is precisely because it calls us to go beyond the ethic based on a tit-for-tat reciprocity. I'll scratch your back, only if you scratch mine. In stark contrast, the words of Jesus invite us to do unto others as we would have them do unto us. That's very different than what earthly logic or even basic justice would demand. Unless you miss this call to a whole new ethic, a radically different way to treat those who have wronged us, Jesus makes it explicit in his command to love your enemy, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you. Clearly, for a disciple of Jesus, it is not enough to simply not wish evil on others. No, the gospel is a call to break the cycle of hatred and hostility that would divide us, to take the initiative in order to heal the brokenness, which manifests itself in a kind of tribalism that breeds a world of us versus them. How is the cycle to be broken? How does healing happen? Well, someone has to make the first move. Someone has to step out of the tit-for-tat spiral. Who is that going to be? I once read that the best commentary on Scripture is Scripture. So let's look at what Matthew adds to Luke's account of his teaching. In Matthew, it's all part of the Sermon on the Mount, which includes the Beatitudes, and then speaks about the relationship between worship and behavior, with the simple words, if your brother has something against you, leave your gift at the altar and go first to make peace with your brother, and then bring your gift to the altar. Please note that it doesn't say if you have something against your brother, but rather if your brother or sister has something against you. In short, it doesn't matter who started the argument or who is holding the grudge. What matters is that reconciliation take place. And that will only happen if one side takes the initiative. Since we can't control another's behavior, but can only control our own, we, you and I, have to make that first move. Now we're back where we started. Do unto others, not as they do unto you, but as you would have them do unto you. That's what it means to love your enemy. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. Indeed, that's what it means to be merciful, as God is merciful to you. What makes the gospel good news is precisely that God takes the initiative to be merciful to us, giving up the glory of heaven to come among us, to share our lot, to share our pain, to share our death. And clearly all this underlines how being merciful is not about feelings or even words. Rather, mercy entails deeds, taking the initiative to make peace, to give and forgive. Let me end with a story, a true story. It happened 50 years ago, when we Norbertines made our novitiate in what is now the YMCA. It was a time when we always wore our white habit, and studying Latin was a required part of seminary training. It was a Saturday afternoon, and 3 of the novices were going for a walk along a pond that was at the other end of the property. Suddenly, 3 young boys popped out of the bushes, and seeing these men in white, and presuming they were priests, knelt down and said, "Father, give us your blessing." Well, that was a little awkward, since the guys weren't ordained, and doing blessings now seemed a bit premature. Happily, one of the men, who wanted to keep the rules, but still respond to the simple faith of the children, just raised his right arm and said in Latin, "Nemo dat quod non habet." You can't give what you don't have. Well, we have a great deal in the gift of faith and the call to share. All we need is the imagination to find opportunities, the wisdom to ascertain what are the right words, and the courage to speak them and live them. Words and deeds that answer the gospel's call to feed the hungry, give drink to the thirsty, shelter the homeless, to stand with those who need our support. Like the overwhelming majority of refugees and immigrants who, like our parents, grandparents, or even great-grandparents, have come to this land seeking safety for their children and a better life for their family. To say anything less is simply not true. And so, nourished by the bread that is broken and the wine that is poured out, the real presence of God among us, we would take that initiative. We would have those open hearts, open to the stranger. And so the kingdom might come just a little closer this day.